Have you ever imagined how the world would be like if the brightest minds of the past had faded into oblivion? What would you do if I told you that some of the most remarkable scientific breakthroughs, mathematical formulas, and medical treatments we apply nowadays were conceived over 1,000 years ago, deep within the Islamic world? Welcome to the tale of a lost treasure, not gold or silver, but knowledge. From the 8th to the 14th century, an era referred to as the Islamic Golden Age, the Muslim world emerged as the light of intellectual excellence. Baghdad, Cordoba, and Cairo became centers of innovation, learning, and cultural progress. While Europe was stuck in the darkness of the medieval ages, Muslim intellectuals were establishing the foundations of science, medicine, astronomy, mathematics, chemistry, philosophy, art, and architecture too. This is not just a history lesson. This is the hidden legacy of humanity, a forgotten era where the thirst for knowledge changed the destiny of the world. In this series, we'll uncover the secrets of the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, the genius of Ibn Sina's medical texts, Al-Khwarizmi's revolutionary mathematics, and the forgotten experiments that predicted gravity, optics, and flight centuries before Europe rediscovered them. Prepare yourselves, because what you're about to listen to will reshape the way you view history forever. This is the forgotten knowledge of the Islamic Golden Age, the rise of Baghdad and the House of Wisdom. To actually appreciate the Golden Age of Islam, we have to travel back to one city, Baghdad. Established in 762 CE by the Abbasid Caliph Al-Mansur, Baghdad was not only a capital city, it was a fantasy. Conceived as a round city along the Tigris River, it was soon to become the Islamic world's center of learning. But what truly set Baghdad apart was the Bayt al-Hikmah, the House of Wisdom. It was not just a library, but a magnificent academy where Muslim, Christian, Jewish, and even Zoroastrian scholars collaborated together, translating ancient Greek, Persian, and Indian writings into Arabic. The mission? To save, learn, and build upon the knowledge of mankind. Caliphs such as Harun al-Rashid and his son al-Mamun were not only rulers, they were science patrons. They welcomed scholars from all over the known world and provided them with handsome stipends. This culture of intellectual liberty and free exchange gave rise to findings that would resound through centuries. Astronomers and mathematicians, chemists and physicians, engineers, they all convened in Baghdad. Here the foundations of algebra were sown, medical works were gathered, astronomical observations equaled those of any ancient culture. Baghdad became an icon, not only of empire, but of enlightenment. And at its center was the conviction that knowledge was a sacred obligation. Seek knowledge, even if it reaches you in China. The Prophet Muhammad PBUH had instructed, and the Muslims obeyed. The House of Wisdom was not merely a building. It was a concept, a mighty one that transformed the trajectory of human history. Translators, thinkers, and the preservation of global knowledge. In the midst of Baghdad's House of Wisdom, a quiet revolution was taking place, thanks to the translation. Giant brains like Hunayn ibn Ishaq, a Nestorian Christian scholar, headed translation teams that translated works of Plato, Aristotle, Hippocrates, Galen, and many more into Arabic. But these translations were not replicas. These were the beginnings of innovation. These thinkers did not just conserve Greek knowledge, these questioned it, stretched it, and set it right. When Greek writings were ambiguous, Muslim philosophers brought systematic observation, mathematical specificity, and logical science. Al-Kindi, sometimes referred to as the philosopher of the Arabs, combined Islamic philosophy with that of the Greeks to create an original worldview that appreciated faith and reason in equal measure. He wrote within disciplines mathematics, medicine, astronomy, music, and optics. Then science and spirit were not conflicted. Intellectuals viewed the quest for knowledge as a way of worship, an attempt to comprehend the laws that Allah had ordained in the universe. Paper, newly brought from China, was used extensively, superseding parchment and transforming the way knowledge was kept and disseminated. Baghdad was the world's largest collection of books, and information availability was a pillar of the Islamic world. It spread west to Cordoba in Spain and east to Samarkand. A wave of insight, born on curiosity and belief, started reforming civilizations. It wasn't the treasure of the Islamic world, it soon became the treasure of the world. Mathematics, the language of the universe. When Europe was still using Roman numerals, the Islamic Golden Age brought with it a system that revolutionized the world, Arabic numerals. But it all starts not in Arabia, it starts in India. Muslim scholars such as Al-Khwarizmi, the creator of algebra, saw the ingenuity of Hindu mathematics and advanced it to center stage. He developed it, elaborated upon it, and presented the world with algebra, the Arabic term being al-Jabr. The works of Al-Khwarizmi laid the groundwork for computation today. Without his contributions, there would be no algorithms, and without algorithms, no computers, no mobile phones, no internet. He also brought in the decimal positional system, a principle so straightforward, yet so groundbreaking, that it made advanced mathematics for complicated calculations available to merchants, scientists, and engineers. And then trigonometry. Muslim astronomers and mathematicians such as Al-Battani employed it to plot the stars, figure out prayer times, and calculate the direction of the Kaaba, extending the limits of mathematics for both religious and scientific purposes. Geometry, which was once employed to survey land, was now employed to plan elaborate Islamic buildings, chart the globe, and unravel heavenly enigmas. During this golden age, mathematics wasn't a subject, it was an idiom, a code of God to decipher the codes of creation. From the streets of Europe to those of Asia, children would someday learn from the books in Arabic penned by Muslim scholars, testament to the fact that the digits we all use on a daily basis come with a history that speaks of continents and centuries. The golden libraries, beacons of knowledge. In the midst of the Islamic Golden Age, not only was knowledge preserved, it was worshipped. And so were born some of the world's greatest libraries. The House of Wisdom in Baghdad was not only a library, it was an institution of international learning. Scholars from all cultures and religions flocked here, not to debate, but to learn to translate, research, and innovate. These libraries were not just buildings packed with books, they were representations of the Muslim world's commitment to acquiring knowledge. They contained manuscripts in science, philosophy, medicine, astronomy, and mathematics, many of which would have been lost forever if Muslim scholars had not saved them. In the library of Cordoba in Islamic Spain, there were more than 400,000 books when most libraries in Europe had less than 1,000. Muslim leaders heavily invested in these institutions. They sponsored scholars, supported translations of Greek, Indian, and Persian texts, and established a culture in which learning was valued above everything. These libraries became hubs of inspiration that would go on to spark the European Renaissance. But what became of these riches of wisdom? How did they disappear? And what does that say about the vulnerability of knowledge? Astronomy and time measurement, the brilliance of Muslim astronomers. Astronomy in the Islamic Golden Age was much more than gazing at the stars or calculating horoscopes. It was an essential science applied for religious and practical purposes. From calculating prayer times and the direction of the Kaaba to constructing calendars and assisting navigation, astronomy was a vital tool of daily life. Muslim thinkers mapped the heavens with astounding accuracy. Central to all this investigation was the House of Wisdom Beit al-Hikmah in Baghdad, where al-Farghani, al-Battani, and al-Zarqali were among scholars making historic observations. They advanced the ancient Greek and Indian astronomy knowledge, constructed intricate devices such as the astrolabe, and determined the circumference of the Earth centuries ahead of when it went mainstream in Europe. Their efforts paved the way for subsequent Renaissance astronomers who used Muslim theories and charts to further study the universe. In most respects, the precision with which the Islamic world measured time and space was unexcelled for centuries. These contributions weren't only scientific, they were also spiritual. In Islam, it is imperative that one knows the appropriate time for prayer, fasting, and pilgrimage. Astronomy thus became a bridge between science and faith, both being elevated by this. Medicine and healing, the hospitals of the Islamic Golden Age. In the Islamic Golden Age, medicine was perhaps one of the most developed subjects. While Europe continued to hold on to superstition and remedies from the past, the Muslim world had long established a scientific and systematic way of curing. Hospitals, referred to as Bimaristans, were founded in urban areas such as Baghdad, Cairo, and Damascus, where free medical care was provided to all, regardless of status, religion, or affluence. These were not merely clinics, they were full-fledged teaching hospitals, with wards, pharmacies, operating rooms, and libraries. Outstanding doctors, such as Ibn Sina Avicenna and Al-Khwarizmi wrote medical encyclopedias which were employed for centuries both in the Islamic world and Europe. Ibn Sina's Canon of Medicine became a standard university textbook in European medical schools for more than 500 years. Al-Razi distinguished between smallpox and measles, initiated experimental medicine, and asserted the value of cleanliness. These scholars exercised observation, documentation, and diagnosis, principles that remain at the core of medicine today. They felt that restoring body health needed to take into account both physical and spiritual health. Their scientific yet holistic approach established Islamic civilization as a center of medical wisdom, centuries before its time. The legacy of libraries, House of Wisdom, and beyond. One of the highlights of the Islamic Golden Age was the Beit al-Hikmah, or House of Wisdom, in Baghdad. It wasn't merely a library, it was a magnificent academy where academics from various cultures and religions came together to exchange knowledge, translate old texts, and expand frontiers in science, philosophy, and literature. Patronized by caliphs such as Harun al-Rashid and his son al-Mamun, the House of Wisdom flourished as a center of intellectual illumination. Greek, Persian, Indian, and Roman texts were translated into Arabic. Scholars such as al-Kindi, al-Farabi, and Hunayn ibn Ishaq translated Aristotle, Plato, and Hippocrates' works, sending them down to posterity. But the House of Wisdom was not only about preservation, it was an innovation hub. Mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy developed intensely within it. The collective environment favored asking questions, arguing, and finding. Others such as Cordoba, Cairo, and Timbuktu emulated it, each becoming centers of knowledge within their areas. The Islamic world had libraries containing hundreds of thousands of manuscripts during its height, when Europe's largest collections consisted of mere hundreds. The House of Wisdom spirit reminds us that real progress arises from openness, curiosity, and unity, principles that are more critical than ever in today's fragmented world. The House of Wisdom and its global influence. In the very center of Baghdad in the Islamic Golden Age stood a pillar of wisdom that would determine the direction of world history, the fabled Beit al-Hikmah, or House of Wisdom. Founded by Caliph Harun al-Rashid and further developed by his son al-Mamun, it was not merely a library. It was a force of investigation, translation, invention, and intellectual cross-pollination that attracted scholars from all corners of the known world. Here, Greek, Persian, Indian, and Roman texts were translated into Arabic. Not only did this preserve hundreds of works that could otherwise have been lost forever, but it provided the foundation for new findings. Muslim scholars did not simply replicate these works. They tested, challenged, and developed them, making advancements in the fields of mathematics, astronomy, medicine, chemistry, and philosophy. Picture scholars working round the clock under oil lamps, translating Plato, Aristotle, and Galen into Arabic, and at the same time formulating new theories. The House of Wisdom hosted debates and encouraged an open environment of inquiry based on no religious or ethnic backgrounds, a real potpourri of knowledge. The ripple effect was vast. The intellectual capital created in Baghdad would later find its way into Europe via Spain and Sicily, planting the seeds of the European Renaissance centuries hence. It was this culture of curiosity and intellectual liberty that saw the Islamic Golden Age as a period of unprecedented progress. The mathematics revolution, algebra, algorithms, and the foundations of modern science. One of the Islamic Golden Age's most significant contributions was in the field of mathematics, a field which now underpins almost every facet of modern science, technology, and economics. At the nexus of this revolution was the Persian polymath, Muhammad ibn Musa Al-Khwarizmi. Al-Khwarizmi is referred to as the father of algebra. His book Al-Kitab al-Mukhtasar fi Hisab al-Jabr wal-Muqabala presented systematic techniques for solving linear and quadratic equations, what we currently refer to as algebra. In reality, the word algebra itself stems from al-Jabr, one of the words in his title. But his work didn't end there. Al-Khwarizmi also invented the idea of algorithms, which comes from the Latinized version of his name. Now algorithms power everything, from the apps on your phone to the world's most sophisticated AI systems. His books were eventually translated into Latin and had a profound impact on mathematics in Europe for centuries. Muslim mathematicians also brought Indian innovation, the decimal positional number system, to the West, supplanting cumbersome Roman numerals and providing the foundation for arithmetic today. The use of zero, crucial for calculus and computing, became universal as a result of their work. The Islamic world wasn't just solving equations, they were building the mathematical language of the future. Geometry, trigonometry, and even the early foundations of calculus were all significantly advanced during this era, influencing everything from architecture to astronomy. This mathematical revolution didn't exist in isolation. It was part of a larger ecosystem of curiosity and learning. And in our next part, we'll see how those numbers found their way to the stars. Mapping the heavens. The astronomers who reached for the stars while everyone else in the world was still gazing at the night sky in awe and superstition. Islamic Golden Age scholars were unraveling the cosmos with precision. Astronomy was more than a curiosity. It was a science of extreme relevance, dictating navigation, farming, religious rituals, and clocks. Leading the pack were such giants as Al-Battani, Al-Sufi, Al-Zarqali, and Ulugh Beg, giants whose astronomical measurements redefine the way we comprehend the universe. Al-Battani, frequently Latinized as Albertinus, refined Ptolemy's astronomical figures and provided incredibly accurate calculations for the duration of the solar year. His work set the stage for the European Renaissance astronomers such as Copernicus, who referenced Al-Battani in his groundbreaking heliocentric model. Abd al-Rahman al-Sufi, in his celebrated Book of Fixed Stars, incorporated ancient Greek star charts with his own observations, recording star brightness, positions, and constellations in detailed pictures. He was among the first to write about the Andromeda Galaxy, many centuries before the invention of the telescope. In Islamic Spain, Al-Zarqali Arzakel constructed accurate astronomical devices such as the astrolabe and the universal latitude independent astrolabe, through which sailors and travelers were able to sail by the stars over vast distances, a device that would ultimately lead European explorers across the oceans. Then there was Ulugh Beg, a 15th century prince of the Timurid line, who constructed a monumental observatory in Samarkand. His star catalog of more than 1,000 stars was one of the most precise ever made prior to the telescope era. What made these astronomers different was their use of empirical observation, mathematics, and carefully crafted instruments, a scientific methodology centuries in advance of its time. Their nighttime heavens were not poetry. They were data charts of a vast and comprehensible universe. In the next part, we'll explore how this spirit of precision and curiosity took root in the field of medicine, and how Muslim physicians laid the foundations for modern healthcare. Healers of civilization. The Golden Age of Islamic medicine. While Europe struggled under medical superstitions and fatalism, the Islamic Golden Age saw a revolution in healthcare that blended science, experience, and compassion. Hospitals called Bamaristans were built in urban centers such as Baghdad, Cairo, and Damascus. They were not merely institutions for the sick, they were teaching hospitals, which were open to all citizens alike, regardless of religion, gender, or class. The sick were kept in separate wards by disease, provided with beds, food, and even psychological attention. The treatment was free, paid for by endowments waqf, an early form of public health care. At the center of this revolution were towering figures such as Al-Razi, Ibn Sina, and Al-Zarawi. Al-Razi, a Persian polymath, wrote more than 200 books on medicine. He was one of the first to distinguish between measles and smallpox, and he promoted evidence-based medicine, ethics, and experimental science. He thought physicians ought to use observation and reason, rather than books, to diagnose. And then there was Ibn Sina Avicenna, a name familiar throughout the world. His encyclopedic canon of medicine was a medical guide in East and West for more than 600 years. It ranged from anatomy to pharmacology, infectious diseases, and surgical techniques. It stressed the value of clean water, exercise, mental well-being, and wholesome diets, concepts remarkably up to date. Al-Zarawi Abulcasis, who is considered to be the father of surgery, brought over 200 surgical tools into use, numerous which are used even now. He wrote about operations such as caesarean delivery, cataract removal, and tooth extraction, and even created surgical threads from animal intestines. Islamic medicine viewed the body and soul together, supporting mind treatments, music therapy, and overall healing. There, in those hospitals and classrooms, science and spirituality met, and precision met compassion, a legacy that dominated medicine for centuries. The language of logic. Muslim mathematicians who redefined the rules. It was in the majestic halls of Baghdad, Cordoba, and Samarkand that Muslim mathematicians didn't merely fix problems, they created the language of mathematics today. At the heart of this revolution was a name still remembered in every high school textbook: Al-Khwarizmi. Nicknamed the father of algebra, his work, Al-Kitab al-Mukhtasar fi Hisab al-Jabr wal-Muqabala, brought algebra as a separate science, al-Jabr, or the reunion of broken pieces. But Al-Khwarizmi did even more. His treatise on Hindu-Arabic numerals spread the use of the number system we now use, 0 to 9. Without him, we may still be stuck with Roman numerals, useless for complicated calculations. His name, Al-Khwarizmi, even gives us the term algorithm, a basic principle behind computer science. Beyond him, mathematicians such as Omar Khayyam developed geometric solutions to cubic equations, while Al-Khwarizmi investigated inductive reasoning, a step toward mathematical proof. Muslim mathematicians were also accomplished astronomers, applying trigonometry to calculate the circumference of the Earth, determine the distances between stars, and find the direction of Mecca from any point on Earth. They had the sine, cosine, tangent, and even the decimal fractions in place, which laid the foundation for calculus centuries down the line. But it wasn't numbers for numbers' sake. It was about unraveling the mysteries of the universe, underpinned by the Quranic imperative that obtaining knowledge is an act of faith. From Al-Qarawiyyin to Al-Azhar, the world's first universities, education during the Islamic Golden Age was not just for the elite, it was for anybody who wanted to know. This dream created schools that would one day influence contemporary universities around the world. The University of Al-Qarawiyyin, established in 859 CE in Fez, Morocco, is generally considered to be the oldest continuously operating and existing degree-granting university in the world. It was founded by an extraordinary woman, Fatima al-Fihri. The university admitted students from various parts of the world and different religions. Students learned theology, astronomy, grammar, law, and medicine all in one place. Shortly thereafter, Al-Azhar University was founded in Cairo in 970 CE. Initially developed as an institution of Islamic scholarship, it evolved into a hub for higher education in mathematics, science, philosophy, and even literature. These universities led the way in creating systematic curricula, academic degrees, and intellectual freedom. The focus on Ijaza certification was the beginning of academic credentials. Students had to demonstrate their knowledge before they could teach, establishing a system of quality education that protected the purity of learning for centuries to come. The attitude of these universities was that of inquiry and respect for knowledge, a perception that education was the key to spiritual and societal development. Preservation and translation, how Muslim scholars saved global knowledge. While Europe was descending into the Dark Ages, a brilliant light of learning was shining brightly in the Islamic world. Muslim scientists didn't merely develop science, they saved the intellectual heritage of ancient civilizations that would otherwise have been lost. Within the House of Wisdom, Beit al-Hikmah in Baghdad, Scholars from diverse cultures and faiths came together to translate the works of ancient writings from Greek, Sanskrit, Persian, Syriac, and Latin into Arabic. Translating was not a process of copying. It was profound understanding, annotation, and even extension of the original writings. Works of Plato, Aristotle, Hippocrates, Galen, Euclid, and Ptolemy were translated and learned enthusiastically. Indian mathematicians and Persian philosophers' works were included in the curriculum of Islamic schools. What made this era special was the open intellectual environment. Christians, Jews, Zoroastrians, and Muslims collaborated in the quest for knowledge. Philosophy, medicine, astronomy, and mathematics were perfected, rectified, and enhanced. Without this gargantuan undertaking, much of what the classical Greeks and Romans knew would have vanished forever. Europe's subsequent Renaissance drew upon the books that the Muslim scholars translated and safeguarded. The Islamic Golden Age didn't merely shine. It kept the flame of world knowledge burning when the rest of the world allowed it to flicker. Preservation and translation, how Muslim scholars saved global knowledge, while Europe lapsed into the Dark Ages. A fierce glow of knowledge raged in the Islamic world. Muslim scholars did not merely develop science, but preserved the intellectual heritage of ancient civilizations that might otherwise have perished. In the House of Wisdom Beit al-Hikmah in Baghdad, scholars from different cultures and religions came together to translate ancient works from Greek, Sanskrit, Persian, Syriac, and Latin into Arabic. This translation was not just copying, it was profound understanding, explanation, and frequently improvement of the original texts. Plato's, Aristotle's, Hippocrates, Galen's, Euclid's, and Ptolemy's works were translated and read with fervor. Indian mathematicians and Persian philosophers' works were incorporated into the Islamic Learning Center's curriculum. What was so special about this era was the open intellectual environment. Christians, Jews, Zoroastrians, and Muslims collaborated in the quest for knowledge. Philosophy, medicine, astronomy, and mathematics were perfected, corrected, and developed. Without this colossal endeavor, a great deal of classical Roman and Greek knowledge could have been lost forever. Europe's subsequent Renaissance was founded upon the books translated and preserved by Muslim scholars. The Islamic Golden Age did not merely shine, it kept the flame of world knowledge burning when the rest of the world allowed it to fade. The power of paper, revolutionizing knowledge in the Islamic world. One of the most important, but least remembered, turning points during the Islamic Golden Age was the discovery of paper, a substance that revolutionized the world. In 751 CE, following the Battle of Talas fought between the Abbasid Caliphate and Chinese Tang Dynasty, Chinese papermakers were taken into captivity. Rather than hiding the secret, the Muslims learned, perfected, and popularized the art of paper making across the Islamic world. Prior to this, information was inscribed on costly materials such as papyrus or parchment, restricting access. Paper, on the other hand, was cheap, resilient, and less cumbersome to make. Baghdad, Damascus, and Cairo were centers for paper manufacture. The first non-Chinese paper mill was constructed in Samarkand. This revolution in writing produced a proliferation in the composition of books, the reproduction of manuscripts, and the establishment of large libraries. Scholars were able to disseminate ideas more rapidly and to more people than ever before. Knowledge was made available not only to elites, but to students, teachers, merchants, and travelers. Thanks to paper, Islamic society was the most literate civilization of its age. Education flourished. Scholarly notes, poetry, commentaries on religion, and medical encyclopedias were penned and archived. This stealthy revolution of paper was the groundwork for everything else. Had it not occurred, perhaps ideas from scholars never would have dispersed or endured. Libraries of light, where knowledge was treasure. Suppose books were greater treasures than gold. Scholars all around the world assembled there, and seeking knowledge was regarded as a divine responsibility. That's exactly what the majestic libraries of the Islamic Golden Age embody. Perhaps the most famous of all was Bayt al-Hikmah, the House of Wisdom in Baghdad. Constructed during the rule of Caliph Harun al-Rashid and enlarged by Caliph al-Mamun, it wasn't merely a library. It was a research center, translation house, and university all rolled into one. Here, scholars translated invaluable works from Greek, Sanskrit, Persian, and Syriac into Arabic. Philosophers, mathematicians, astronomers, and physicians collaborated with each other, comparing concepts, arguing theories, and constructing new knowledge. But the House of Wisdom wasn't solitary. In Cordoba, under the Islamic Spain period, the Caliph al-Hakam II library was claimed to have more than 400,000 books. Whereas the majority of Europe had minimal collections, the Muslim world was full of books, due to the proliferation of paper and the esteem with which education was regarded. In Fez, Timbuktu, and Cairo, libraries thrived. Books were copied by hand, stored with care, and even listed in early methods of cataloging. These libraries were accessible to students, scholars, and anyone willing to learn. They were hubs of intellectual freedom, where even radical ideas could be debated respectfully. This profound affection for books and learning served to save ancient knowledge that could have been lost, and generated new knowledge that would eventually spark the European Renaissance. Architectural wonders, the timeless legacy of Islamic design. As science and philosophy bloomed, so did architecture, a form of art wherein geometry transcended spirituality, and beauty resonated with the divine. Islamic architecture during the Golden Age was not only about constructing buildings. It was about creating symbols of wisdom, authority, and harmony with the Creator. From the Grand Alhambra of Spain to the breathtaking Great Mosque of Samarra in Iraq, Islamic architecture merged mathematics, symmetry, and art with religious belief. These structures employed exact measurements, geometric patterns, and calligraphy to symbolize the boundless nature of Allah. Minarets and domes were not just aesthetically pleasing, but functional and symbolic as well. Domes symbolized the vault of heaven, while minarets amplified the call to prayer into far and wide distances. Every aspect of the architecture was imbued with meaning, both worldly function and divine purpose. Perhaps the most celebrated example is the Alhambra Palace, where exquisite Muqarna stalactite vaulting, purity symbolized by water channels, and walls inscribed with poetry and Quranic inscriptions about it. Another example is the Shah Mosque in Isfahan, famous for the ideal proportions of its architecture and the bright turquoise tiles covering the interior surfaces. Muslim architects also set the pace in town planning whole cities like Cairo and Baghdad with ventilation, lighting, water supply, and public space considerations decades before similar principles were widespread in the West. Their geometry and optics gave them the ability to plan buildings that would last the ages and weather the elements. And most importantly, it was all a sacrifice, an expression of divine perfection done humbly on earth. The fall of the Golden Age, what went wrong? As we arrive at the end of our odyssey through the Islamic Golden Age, one very important question remains. If this period was so advanced, so influential, why did it fall? The reality is multifaceted. Various factors came together to darken this shining page of history. Internal strife first came in the form of dynastic struggles, civil wars, and political turmoil that eroded the cohesiveness of the Islamic world. When scholars require peace and support to flourish, war renders learning impossible. And then there were invasions. The Mongol invasion, particularly the sack of Baghdad in 1258, was a crippling loss. The House of Wisdom, the hub of worldwide knowledge, was set on fire, its books thrown into the tireless river. It's reported that the river flowed black with ink. Subsequently, European crusades and colonial empires transferred power and wealth away from the Muslim world. While Europe was starting to develop its renaissance, ironically founded upon the very knowledge kept safe by Muslim scholars, the Islamic world started shutting its doors. Yet another overarching factor was the loss of value in ijtihad, autonomous reasoning. Intellectual atrophy seeped in over time. Free debate gave way to inflexible thinking. Philosophical inquiry and scientific inquiry started being treated as anathema, and scholars shuddered at questioning orthodoxy. The world changed. Trade corridors shifted. Empires rose and fell. And gradually, the light of knowledge slowly faded away, lost to the very world that it used to enlighten. But the heritage wasn't forgotten. It survived in our hospitals, our maths, our sciences, our architecture, in all our algorithms, all our telescopes, all our universities. There is something of the Golden Age. The lost treasure isn't merely the past, it's a challenge to the present. A reminder that knowledge is not to be disparaged, that religion and logic can be buddies, and that lost glory may rise again.